Most people don't realize this, but the reason you feel stuck isn't because you lack discipline, motivation, or intelligence. It's because you've been taught the wrong model of change. From a young age, we're fed this idea that transformation is supposed to be dramatic, a sudden mindset shift, a perfectly structured routine, a new version of yourself that appears overnight. So every time you decide to improve, you go all in. You promise yourself that starting tomorrow, you'll wake up early, study for hours, stop procrastinating, eat better, exercise, and somehow still have energy left. And for a day or two, maybe even a week, it works. Then life hits. You miss a day, and something subtle but dangerous happens. You don't just miss the habit. You start questioning yourself. Why can't I stay consistent? What's wrong with me? That quiet self-doubt is what actually keeps people stuck for years. Here's the part nobody tells you. Massive change doesn't fail because it's hard. It fails because it demands too much identity change too quickly. Your brain resists sudden shifts. It wants safety, familiarity, and low energy cost. That's why motivation fades so fast. Motivation is expensive. It burns mental energy, and once it's gone, you're left with nothing to fall back on. This is why people who rely on motivation feel productive in bursts and exhausted the rest of the time. But there's a different approach, one that doesn't fight your brain, doesn't require hype, and doesn't collapse when you're tired or stressed. It's so subtle that most people ignore it, and that's exactly why it works. The 1% rule is built on a simple but uncomfortable truth. Your life doesn't change from big decisions. It changes from tiny behaviors repeated consistently. Improving by 1% doesn't feel impressive. It doesn't give you a rush. It doesn't look good on social media. And that's the trap, because the improvements that feel impressive are usually the ones you can't sustain. The 1% rule doesn't ask you to overhaul your life. It asks you to slightly outperform your past self. Not once, but daily. And when you do that, something strange happens. You stop feeling like you're forcing change, and you start feeling like change is happening naturally, almost automatically. Think about how most students approach productivity. They wait for the perfect moment, when they're less tired, less distracted, less stressed. That moment rarely comes, so days pass, deadlines get closer, anxiety increases, and then they try to compensate with extreme effort, all-nighters, panic studying, unrealistic schedules. That cycle is exhausting. The 1% rule breaks it by lowering the entry point so much that resistance disappears. Instead of telling yourself you'll study for 3 hours, you tell yourself you'll open the book and read 1 page. Not because 1 page is enough, but because starting is the hardest part. And once you start, momentum often takes over. But even if it doesn't, you still won, because you reinforce the identity of someone who shows up. This is where most people misunderstand the rule. They think it's about productivity or efficiency. It's not. It's about trust. Every time you complete a tiny promise to yourself, you rebuild self-trust. And self-trust is the foundation of confidence. People who seem disciplined aren't forcing themselves all the time. They simply trust that they'll do what they said they would. That trust is built quietly through small actions that don't feel heroic in the moment. The reason the 1% rule works long-term is because it focuses on identity before results. When you repeatedly act like someone who improves, your brain updates its self-image. And once your identity shifts, behavior follows naturally. Another reason this rule is so powerful is because it removes the fear of failure. When your goal is huge, failure feels catastrophic. Missing 1 day feels like proof that you're not capable. But when your goal is tiny, failure loses its emotional weight. You're not afraid to start because the cost of starting is low. And paradoxically, that's what keeps you consistent. Consistency doesn't come from pressure. It comes from safety. The 1% rule creates psychological safety around progress. It tells your brain, we're not doing anything extreme. We're just moving slightly forward. And your brain agrees to that. Over time, those small actions compound in ways that are invisible at first. Compounding is slow, quiet, and boring, until it isn't. For weeks, it feels like nothing is happening. Then one day, you realize you're focusing longer without forcing it. You're procrastinating less without trying. You're handling stress better without a dramatic mindset shift. That's the moment people call discipline, but what they're really seeing is accumulated evidence. You didn't become disciplined overnight. You became disciplined by proving to yourself, day after day, that you can be trusted with small commitments. This also explains why people burn out when they chase productivity trends. They copy routines that belong to someone else's life, energy level, and responsibilities. The 1% rule is personal. Your 1% is based on where you are, not where you think you should be. For someone who's completely overwhelmed, 1% might be organizing their desk. For someone already consistent, 1% might be pushing slightly deeper focus. There's no comparison, there's no race, just forward movement. If you apply this rule to things like phone addiction, the same principle holds. You don't need to quit social media or delete apps. That's an identity shock. Instead, you create friction. You delay usage slightly. You become aware before acting. That awareness is a 1% improvement, and awareness is always the first step toward control. The same goes for burnout. Burnout doesn't come from working hard. It comes from working without recovery or control. A 1% improvement there might be stopping 5 minutes earlier or taking one intentional break. Small adjustments restore agency, and agency restores energy. What makes the 1% rule quietly life-changing is that it shifts your relationship with time. You stop asking, how fast can I change, and start asking, how long can I stay consistent? That question leads to sustainable growth instead of short-term spikes, and sustainability is what actually wins in the long run, in school, in health, in confidence, and in life. If there's one thing to take from this, it's this. Stop waiting for motivation to fix your life. Motivation is unreliable. Systems are quiet but permanent. The 1% rule is a system that works even on bad days, especially on bad days. So tonight, don't aim for a breakthrough. Aim for a slight improvement. One action, one decision, one small step forward. Then do it again tomorrow. That's how real change happens. Not loudly, not instantly, but consistently. And if you commit to that, not for a week, not for a month, but as a way of living, you'll look back one day and realize something surprising. You didn't become a new person. You simply became more of who you were capable of being all along.